Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Away End Show, brought to you by the Elite Football Show. My name is Haider Ciaran and I'm your host as ever today. We've got a fantastic guest today. He is a massive Everton fan. He's also got the Blue Room podcast, which is the most listened Everton podcast around. And he's also on Team Talk Radio. Matt Jones, welcome to Elite Football Show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on, lads. Thanks very much for having me. How are you both doing?
Yeah, not too bad. And I'm also joined by Ciaran. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully. We'll have a chat, Matt, after the game on Saturday, and then we can probably give you a better answer. But Ciaran, welcome, mate. It's good to have you back on as usual, as my usual co-host. How are you doing, and how are you feeling, well, before tonight's game against Istanbul, and then obviously the big one against Everton, because, you know, that could be a make or break, couldn't it, for Ollie?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'd say today, probably like a lot of people, tired after reading so much on the American election last night, and then, it's an interesting one. I can see United probably rotate the squad tonight against Istanbul, because look, we need to play on a Wednesday, and then your game against Everton on Saturday is at, I think, 11:30 or 12. It's one of those, I don't think, if you're playing 90 minutes against Istanbul, you're probably not going to be able to play 90 minutes against Everton at the weekend. So it's a tough ask, but look, you have to do it. So hopefully they can pull something out of the bag.
Absolutely. Guys, before we go on, to all the listeners, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. As you can see with that lovely ticker across the bottom, we're on our road to 1K. We've been on YouTube for about 2-3 months now, so we're nearly there. Please help us out. And you can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Matt, let's start with you, as you are the guest today, and we're talking about Everton. What are your thoughts on Everton's start to the season? I mean, you're looking at it sitting in fourth place. Fantastic start, didn't you? Absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've really enjoyed watching Everton this season. I thought, you know, you gave me a little bit of Leicester vibes going into the first 5 games. I know we shouldn't judge things on a 5-game basis, but fantastic manager, some great signings. It all seems to be clicking. You hit the buffers a little bit the last 2 or 3 games, but overall, how are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the recency bias of the last couple of games is obviously what people have been speaking about in our Everton circles and our royal blue bubbles, if you will, over the last few days. And I think the worrying thing about the last couple of days is that it's sort of a bit of a reminder that the Everton that we saw last season, the long spells, and the Everton we saw post-lockdown isn't that far away. If you take a few players out, you're still looking at a team that's, the large portion of a squad that finished 12th last season, and that is a little bit worrying. But overall, I'm trying to keep positive. I think it's, as you mentioned there, in the early weeks of the season, it was a bit of a, what are we seeing here from this Everton side? Because I think the best thing about it all was it was really fun. And it's been a long time since we've had an Everton side that we could look at and go, bloody hell, you sat there on a Friday night and you're thinking, I can't wait to watch these lads play on Saturday or Sunday or whatever it is at the moment. And that's something we've not had for a while. And the signing of Rodriguez obviously sort of epitomises that. The 2 lads that have come in midfield have done well as well. But yeah, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. But I think overall, if people had said to us at the start of the campaign, you're going to be 4th in the table after 7 games, you're going to be in the Carabao Cup quarterfinals, and you've got James Rodriguez looking like $1 million every time he steps out onto the pitch, then I think Evertonians would have been quite happy with that.
Absolutely, mate. I mean, look, I've really enjoyed watching Everton play this year. I think everything about Everton it's high energy. There's quality as well on the ball. I mean, Ciaran, I'm going to bring you in. We've spoken about Everton maybe in the 4 times, I think, already, haven't we? About the team that we've enjoyed watching the most, and also just sort of the impact. But Calvert-Lewin's probably someone that I know myself, I wasn't the biggest fan of. I didn't think he quite had it, but he's been phenomenal this season. And what's impressed you most about him?
I think what's impressed me most about him is just before every time I seem to watch Everton, you would see him kind of running along the wing and he'd be one of the main attacking players, but you didn't really see that kind of poacher's instinct too much. This season, I see the complete opposite, and it's kind of similar to what Ancelotti did in some of those big kind of AC Milan teams. Made sure his main predominant striker was getting into the box and scoring those, as you say, kind of the scruffy goals. The one that always sticks out, I think it was the 2nd week of the season when it was either James or Richarlison took the shot and it looked like it might have gone in or gone wide, and then Calvert-Lewin was there just to tap it in anyway. Those were types of goals you weren't seeing week in, week out from him, which for the type of player we're seeing this season, it's kind of remarkable that he wasn't doing that before. He's been very impressive, not only with Everton, but scores in his debut for England as well. I don't think there's much you can kind of criticize there. I think what Ancelotti has brought to the Everton side, you have more ways to be able to play, especially with those kind of the midfield three, and then having Rodriguez above that. It just helps out the strikers. I said it last week, it'll be very interesting to see what happens when you don't have Rodriguez, you don't have Richarlison, Digne. How will that affect Calvert-Lewin's game? Will he have to kind of push more back into midfield to try and win the ball? Or will there still be enough creativity behind him where he can stick in those kind of positions where he can score goals? If he can do that and Everton can get those kind of secondary players that maybe aren't James Rodriguez to supply him that ball, I think you could see a quite big goal tally this year for Calvert-Lewin. But again, it goes to that point that Matt said, it's not an Everton team that's far away from the team that finished 12th. So with the season that's in it, like we've said a million times, Haider, they're trying to fit a 10-month season into a 9-month season. And that's going to be difficult on a lot of these players, especially with internationals. For the likes of James Rodriguez, every time he has to go back to South America to play an international game and come back, you'll see that kind of effect. And how does that affect Everton if they're still challenging for top four later on in the season? That's one of the kind of questions that I would have about it.
Absolutely. Matt, have you got anything to add to that? Because what I would say is that what we saw against Newcastle, and this is with any side, if United didn't have Bruno, let's say didn't have Rashford, and they didn't have, let's say, Martial, United will struggle because they're three of your best, perhaps most creative players. And we've seen without Martial, Man United have really struggled in the games. I mean, Everton didn't have James, was injured. Digne wasn't there. Richarlison, I believe, was banned. That's three very key players. Does it worry you that going forward, as we talk about the squad, and as Ciaran said, condensing 10 months into 9, that can this squad, with a few key players out, can it still sustain the same levels of performance?
A little bit, yeah. But there's two other players that you didn't mention there as well. And Mason Holgate, who's sort of been forgotten about, who's probably our best centre-back for long portions of the campaign. And while Yerry Mina and Michael Keane have done well, I think opposition sides are sort of getting onto them a little bit now. Look at Newcastle's second goal at the weekend. I don't know if you lads saw it, where Mina sort of pushed out and Ryan Fraser just goes, yeah, I'm just going to run in behind you. And it's very easy when you're playing against those two to do that sort of thing. So Mason Holgate obviously needs to, when he comes back, you think he'll add something a little bit different to the defence. And the other one is Seamus Coleman, who's obviously had a bit of an up and down time, I think, since that horrendous leg injury he got a couple of years ago. But to be fair, was somebody who I thought Everton needed to replace this summer and look to build on. But he started the season so well and had a really nice partnership going with James Rodriguez in those early games, and he's not been available either. So I think you're looking at a situation there where you could probably got 5 first-team players out, and that shines a light on the rest of the squad, and it's shone a light on the rest of the squad in the last few weeks that indicates that a lot of the lads coming in for them aren't good enough. But in the same breath, I think you're not going to have a situation much throughout the course of the season where you're going to have 5 dead important players out, be it injured or suspended, and it's just one of those things at the moment where Everton have got to grit the teeth and get through it. And there's a stat that we do a stats pack show on the Blue Room with a lad from Sky Sports called Matt Cheatham, and he put a stat out at the weekend going into that Newcastle game saying the 11 lads on the pitch in that game hadn't created as many chances this season together as Lucas Digne and James Rodriguez have as a duo. So I think that just goes to show where Everton's creative outlets come from. And yeah, it's on Calvert-Lewin. I think it's been a really good story, and it's all the better because he's sort of self-made. And I think early on when he came into the side, he looked like that fella who's sort of going to be like, oh yeah, I'll do all the horrible jobs for you lads, don't worry. Do you know when you go into like any new job and you just start off and you sort of say, yeah, I'll make the cup of teas for you, don't worry, I'll go and do it all day. Yeah, I like the equivalent, like I'll run in behind, I'll take the knocks up front, I'll bring the rest of these into play. And now he's sort of 23, 24. He's hung around a little bit. Probably one of the most senior players in the squad in terms of time he's been around. It's sort of like he took his knocks, he's paid his dues, and now he's been given the chance to say, right, just be the number 9. And I think it's dead encouraging because I think goal scoring and the predatory instincts that Ciaran mentioned there are things that are spoken about among football pundits and fans as being innate. Either you've got them or you haven't. And I think what Dom's done, which is really good, is he's shown that if you work hard on it and you watch videos, recently he's watched videos of Drogba, but obviously Carlo's spoken a bit about Pipo Inzaghi as well, and how he's compared him to him, and he wants him to look to him. If you study these fellas and watch what they can do and work hard at your game, then you can add that edge to it. And we're looking at a player now, I think he scored 11 goals in all competitions this season. You know, he scored on his England debut as well, as you mentioned there. He's looking like a serious goal scorer now, and he's still got parts of his game he's got to add to, and he's still got to improve, of course. But I think he's shown that if you put those pieces around him, if you put an elite wide forward next to him and Richarlison, and an elite creator behind him and James Rodriguez, then the lad's got all the attributes to score goals.
I completely agree. I was always one of those that thought predatory instinct, you've got it or you don't. And that's something that, sometimes I look at Marcus Rashford and I think, have you got that natural predatory instinct? Are you a natural finisher? You look at Mason Greenwood, that's a natural cold finisher. I always thought that Calvert-Lewin didn't have it. I thought worked so hard last season. I thought he's great attitude. He can get on the end of a ball. But what I've seen this season, and I hope he carries it on, because it's only better for England, isn't it, that you have another player that can do it. But Matt, let's talk about some of those new signings. James Rodriguez, fantastic. I loved him at Real Madrid. I loved him at Bayern Munich. I loved him when he was at the World Cup and he was one of the best players. I wanted United to sign him years and years ago. Fantastic player. I looked in there, I thought, how is he going to settle? Because he's someone that hasn't played, I don't think, regularly. He's someone that's got immense talent, but he seems to have been out of favour at Real Madrid. He's come in, and it's amazing, isn't it? When you have a manager that believes in you, a manager that really, really thinks that you can change a team. And he's just flourished. And it's been absolutely beautiful to watch. So talented. Then you add Doucouré, who for me, I'm just shocked that none of the other big teams went after him, because I've been saying, Kieran knows this, I've been saying all summer, Abdoulaye Doucouré, an engine room in midfield. He can transition you from defense to attack in the way he carries the ball. And then Alan, I watched a lot of Serie A and I was thinking, Alan, I think he might be past it. Again, fantastic signing. It's incredible that 3 signings the manager wanted have just transformed the team. And you look over perhaps Man United as United fans and you think, yeah, maybe if Ole had got the 3 players he wanted, then, you could see a completely different side. But what's impressed you the most about those 3 signings? And talk to me a bit about how their qualities have just perfectly melded together.
Well, I think the standout one's been Rodriguez. It's, we were speaking before we signed him, and we were sort of trying to put it into context in regards to when was the last time Everton signed a footballer of that profile. And we had to sort of go, we mentioned Andrei Kanchelskis, because obviously we got from Manchester United, albeit he wasn't probably at that level as a world star. We probably had to go back to Alan Ball after, in 1966 in regards to signing a player who was that, well known on the world stage, who had such pedigree at a tournament like that. And he's just come in, and it's like seeing in colour for the first time. In that sense, it's like you see in a football and you go, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what an elite creative player can do with the ball. And he gets hold of it, and it's almost like the football match pivots around him. And no, he's not going to run back and provide much cover. He's probably not going to get stuck in loads and loads. But if you give him time on the ball and you can get onto his left foot, he can make wonderful things happen. And it's been such a boost for Seamus Coleman, who I mentioned has got forward on that right-hand side around him a lot. But his link up with Richarlison and his link up with Lucas Digne in particular, spreading those left-footed passes out to the left-hand side, and those players getting in behind and getting crosses into Dominic Calvert-Lewin have been, that's what Everton's attacking players look like in the opening weeks of the season. That's been the way home in football matches. James out to the left into Calvert-Lewin, and you're getting chances like that. He's been absolutely wonderful, and he's the Evertonians are taking to him straight away. Of course, it's early days, yeah, and he was obviously absent to the game against Newcastle at the weekend. I don't know if you lads heard about the nature of his injury, but didn't sound like a particularly nice one he got in the game against Liverpool. I think Virgil van Dijk gave him a bit of a boot in the unmentionables, and he was
really?
He's got a sore bollock apparently, yeah. So he's
no petition for that, no.
No. So I think he tried to soldier on against Southampton, but couldn't do it. But yeah, apparently he's had a sore bollock in the last couple of weeks. That's why he didn't play against Newcastle. But apparently he's going to be back.
Matt, in the nicest way possible. I really hope that he's okay, but I hope that sore bollock's hurting a little bit more for one more game week. Maybe you can just have a longer break for the international break. Maybe you can take a few days off before, so that United don't have to be terrorised by him on the weekend.
Come on, lads. No one wants to wish anyone to have a sore bollock any day longer than they need to. Come on. Rather he's a sad here. But yeah, he's been wonderful. He's been absolutely wonderful. I think the other two are interesting. It's probably good without being great so far, I'd say. Alan, I think you mentioned there, either in regards to what he was doing in Serie A. At Napoli, he was very much the box-to-box force, wasn't he? He was the lad who'd get the ball in midfield and drive forward with it. And then if Napoli didn't have the ball, he'd be like sort of the one you say, just go and try and win the ball back as much as you want.
Yeah.
At Everton, it's been a little bit different. He's been the fellow that's been tasked with sitting in front of the back four, sort of the deepest of that midfield three. And it feels like he's learning a little bit about that role still. You can't just go and charge after the ball there because you've got to be a bit more disciplined in where you play. And he's done it really well at times. The opening day against Tottenham, he was fantastic. Other games, he's not quite done as well there. I think he's been carrying injury over the last few weeks as well, which has been a little bit of a worry. He was one of our better players against Newcastle in that dreadful game at the weekend. So hopefully he's getting back to that sense. And Decore as well, you mentioned there about him being that engine and that fella that gets forward. What we've seen from him so far early in the season is there's been probably a bit more emphasis on his defensive play because, if you can imagine the midfield three is sort of an upside down triangle. Allen's at the bottom of it. It's been Gomez or whoever on the left of it, given freedom, and Decore's been on the right of it. And when James floats in off that right-hand side, when Seamus Coleman gets forward, it's sort of been... I think Carlo Ancelotti's made sure that Decore knows that you've got to sit in that space sometimes. You can't just let teams counter-attack on the left-hand side for you. And he's done it really well. But I think that the challenge for him going forward and for the manager going forward is to find a way of getting him to do that job, but also finding a way of unlocking that attacking ability we saw at Watford, when he'd get to the edge of the box, have shots, when he'd get in the box and score headers at times as well. So, yeah, those two still sort of finding the feet, sort of learning a little bit about different positions, but James Rodriguez has just been wonderful. I said before I said after the Merseyside derby and before these last two games, and I think he's probably been the best player in the Premier League this season, along with Harry Kane. That's obviously with my royal blue tinted specs on, but he's just been absolutely wonderful. And I just wanted to be fair because on Saturday, not necessarily called key tactical battle in the game. I just want to watch the lad kick a football around because he's wonderful at it. It's been an absolute joy. I think he's been the best signing. I saw someone say, it was probably a Liverpool fan saying, I don't know, Jota's been the best signing. And Jota's been good, don't get me wrong, but for me, it's been James. The way that he's changed. And also, it seems, Ciaran, like he doesn't really run that much, if you know what I mean. He's just a clever player. And like Matt said, Decore having to come out wide. And it kind of reminds you a bit with United that when we play, ours is a bit lopsided as well. Let's say if Mata's on the right or whoever's on the right, maybe Greenwood, they're not going to come out. It's clever, isn't it, Ciaran, from Ancelotti to notice that. And that's what a good manager does. And goes, right, okay, if this player's not going to track back, we've got to shift the midfielder out wide. I mean, what have you been impressed with in terms of Ancelotti's tactics? Because, last season he came in and I thought, world-class manager. He's had a little bit of a difficult time at Napoli. Let's see how he does here because traditionally, he's been with a bigger club. You look at AC Milan's, Real Madrid, PSG. It's an incredible pedigree. He's won multiple Champions Leagues. Didn't quite work out, although Everton went on a nice run. But that's the impact of a top manager, isn't it? And you're seeing that at a club. And when people say, maybe don't go for the big name. Maybe he's past it. He's not past it, is he?
No, look, it's a mixture of having that top manager that can kind of shift their tactics, but also it's the players you bring in, because if this was the same team as last year, I don't think that he'd be able to do exactly what he's doing right now, especially in that midfield three. So like when you were talking about the signings, the ones that kind of went out for me were kind of Decore and Alan, because they allow Everton, when before last season towards the end, they were kind of reverting to that mid block where the midfielders weren't really working in both a pressing ideal or in that defensive unit when they're trying to stop counterattacks. You see that now, and it kind of goes with what Matt said there, where you have Alan playing more defensive than you saw him at Napoli. You have Decore working on his defensive game. It's like a shield to stop those counterattacking kind of threats from a lot of teams that play that way in the Premier League now. And it's worked really well. What you say with James, yeah, he doesn't run, but he doesn't have to run. That's the good part about him. It's probably why he didn't suit the likes of Bayern Munich or Madrid, because they were kind of based on kind of fast-paced wingers when he was never going to be that. But you see the ball skills that he has now. It's unbelievable, and they have that balance to a certain extent, especially when you have someone like Seamus Coleman that's on that right side. Because look, watching him for Ireland all the time, he was one of our best players for years and years and years, because he will bomb up that right wing. So even though James probably isn't going to be a player to go and run past someone, when you have a right winger or a right back that can do that, it provides that bit more stability. And that's where I think the difference is when we say United are lopsided. You won't see Aaron Wan-Bissaka do that, but you will see a player like Seamus Coleman do it. So that kind of helps out on that right wing, but it also allows James to drift in a little bit and to spray those balls across to Luca Digne, and you have Richarlison as well. It's a very interesting one that you look at the differences between the formation. They kind of reverted back to a kind of a hybrid style of 4-4-2 last year. And now you're seeing that more 4-3-3. You're seeing more kind of pressing and counter pressing. And it just is the team, Everton, even though we look at them and the first couple of weeks, they've looked real silky and they've looked really skillful. You also have to realize they're a very hardworking team. And that's what Ancelotti has brought in. And then because of that midfield three and also the defense and how they started to play, it's allowed the attackers to get into the positions they want to get into. It's allowed Richarlison to, even though he's kind of technically out wide, you see him kind of dart in. Even though they play with a 4-4-3 or a 4-3-3, it's not like even lines in a 4-4 or a 4-3-3. You're seeing them kind of move in and out, and that's what's really hard for a defense to kind of see what's going to happen. And then you see with the way Calvert-Lewin's been asked to play, but he's able to play like that because of the way James is playing, because of the way Richarlison's playing, where even though he's out wide, he's still getting in behind. He's darting kind of central as well. So it's one of those that it's not if one tactic works and then there's no plan B. I think the way he sets out his team, that even if something's not working, it's very easy to be able to change it on the fly. And it's something that I don't think Everton have had for a couple of seasons. And it just shows when you can bring in a top-class manager, and then when he's able to bring in the type of players he wants, you'll see improvements. Like I said, I don't think if the level of players that can come in the summer, I don't think you would have seen a huge improvement from last season. You would have seen an improvement because it's longer within his system. But I don't think he would have been able to change it so dramatically as he's done this year. And it works in the Premier League, having that base in midfield, but also having your attacking kind of flair players to have that freedom to kind of express themselves the way James, Richarlison, and now Calvert-Lewin have been able to do. So it's really good. I think it's been one of the better jobs that a manager has done in the start of this Premier League season. And I don't know who got manager of the month for the first month that we had, but it probably should have been Ancelotti.
I think it was, yeah. I think it was. I think it might have been Carlo. I'm not entirely sure on that, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but if it should have been anyway if it wasn't. But he's definitely done the best job thus far, I think.
Yeah, Matt, I want to ask you about that a lot of people. I mean, like I said, I do a tactical podcast on Man United, and a lot of people get very stuck and bogged down with formations. They think it's very, very rigid. You see United fans have been going on about this 4-4-2 diamond, which we've not been playing. It's not a traditional diamond. And fans get very, very caught up in it. And when you look at Carlo, like as Ciaran said, traditionally he has played a 4-4-2, but to be able to change with the times a little bit and be like, okay, with the ball you might be a 4-3-3, sorry, but without the ball you might be a 4-4-2. And a lot of older managers, they're very stuck in their ways, aren't they? But Carlo's molded the system around the players, hasn't he? And that's been the impressive thing. You look at Jose Mourinho, I know it's working right now, but he'll have the exact way that he wants to play. He'll play that low block. He'll be very rigid on sort of perhaps a 4-2-3-1. It'll be asymmetric fullbacks. One will go up while the other one tucks in as a third centre back. It's very much like, this is how I play and this is how the players will play. But Carlo hasn't done that, has he? He's actually thought, if I'm bringing James in, and I was confused where James would play, because I thought he's not going to play midfield because he probably doesn't work hard enough. That's fair to say. But I thought, okay, he might play behind the striker, but then you think, where's Richarlison play? Richarlison being central with his energy it has in some ways transformed the team, hasn't it? And it's kind of in some sense made up for James's lack of work rate. But when you're that good on the ball, it doesn't really matter. So how impressed have you been with Carlo's sort of flexibility and willingness to change it around the players he's got?
Yeah, I think it's sort of been what we expected, really. I think whenever you get a new manager, you do a bit of a deep delve, don't you? Speak to people at clubs you've managed before, and the sort of the overriding sense was the Carlo didn't really have like a set identity or a set formation. If Everton appointed Diego Simeone tomorrow, they'd be playing 4-4-2. If he appointed Antonio Conte, they'd be playing 3-4-3. If he appointed Pep Guardiola, 4-3-3, etc., etc. When it was Carlo Ancelotti, it was like, well, it depends what players he's got, and he'll probably go in. He'll have a look for a few months at what he's got at his disposal, and then make some decisions in the summer about players, and then decide on something for the new season. And that's pretty much what's happened. And we mentioned there in regards to Decore and James and Alaven, how those signings all seem to have been well thought out, and one leads on to the next one, which leads on to the next one, and it's all quite in place. But yeah, he's done pretty well in that regard. I mean, the Newcastle game, God knows what that formation was, to be honest, lads. It was just, one of my colleagues that came on the podcast last night, Paddy Boylan, said it was effectively Newcastle versus an assortment of Everton midfielders, because he played five centre mids, and it was a bit like, what's going on here? And listen, we all have bad days, don't we? And hopefully Carlo just had one at the weekend, because not playing wingers and playing for a 0-0 against Newcastle is probably not ideal, albeit with the lads that we had out. But yeah, I think what it's done is it's been good when those lads have been on the pitch, and that front three in particular, the balance is really good there. James is the creator, Richarlison's the driving force, and Dom's been the one there who's just going to stick the ball in the back of the net when the chances come. But I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, certainly with Richarlison not being available, is it can look a little bit more one-dimensional, because like you both said, he's the one that's sort of going to come in from that left flank, get into the middle next to Calvert-Lewin and make those driving runs in behind. And without him, nobody really in the squad can do that. Anthony Gordon's a young player that's come in and looked bright in spells, and he's more of a wide forward than a wide midfielder. And he's looked okay at times, albeit the manager may not seem to think he's ready. But other than that, you've got Alex Iwobi, who the jury's very much out on still. He's someone who comes to the ball and drops into that space in front of the defence. And then you've got Bernard, who's a similar sort of player. They're not players who are going to make that run in behind, and that's where Everton have looked a little bit one-dimensional in the last couple of games. They haven't really been able to test teams in behind. And, you look at that central area of the pitch at the weekend, and I think Richarlison and Wan-Bissaka have had some great battles, actually, in recent games when they played against each other. I think those two seem to really enjoy the scrap, and on occasions, Richarlison maybe got the better of him, and Wan-Bissaka vice versa. But I look at that area of the pitch at the weekend and I sort of think, well, United are probably going to win that battle now, because Everton haven't got a player who can sort of penetrate that area of the pitch, which is fine. They might have to try and find another way, but I think it's the drop off. I think if you look at United's squad at the moment, and you'd say if one of that front three is not going to play, then you've got Ederson, Cavani to come in, you've got Juan Mata to come in, you've got Daniel James come in, whoever. And I think, whereas you look at Everton, the drop off is a lot bigger when you go to someone like Iwobi or Bernard than you would at United. And I think that's where Everton at the moment probably aren't quite there yet in regards to being a genuine challenger for the top four, because while they're all on the pitch, and when you're watching Richarlison and Rodriguez, you're thinking this is absolutely brilliant. We're going to win every game this season and win the title. It's fantastic. If you take one of those lads out who you're so dependent on, all of a sudden everyone's sort of on the pitch going, what do we do now? Who do we give the ball to when we're under pressure because we haven't got James? Who do you knock the ball over the top to when you're under pressure because you haven't got Richarlison? And we haven't really had those little pressure valves to get us out of those situations. James should be back at the weekend, which is good. But Richarlison's probably, he's probably the most important player in the squad, because he does so much off the ball. He gets back and helps out. He scores goals. He creates. I think every team's got that lad, haven't they, who's the trigger for them in regards to just getting up the pitch and sort of jolting everybody into life. And Everton have
Bruno's our one.
Yeah, and Everton have maybe got a couple of them in Richarlison and Seamus Coleman, and they've both been missed massively because of that over the last couple of games. I think Everton walked through those matches because they haven't got someone to just put that tackle in or charge in and have a shot at goal or something like that. So good that Seamus is back, but Richarlison's a huge miss for the game at the weekend. It just makes me more annoyed that he put that stupid tackle in a derby and that we haven't seen him over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's Matt, you bring out some great points. I'm just going to bring Ciaran in here because you've spoken about something which Richarlison does, which we've mentioned, is that off the ball movement. It's something that we don't see enough, Ciaran, do we, in the modern game? I think when you look at United's squad, we didn't have that really until Van der Beek's come in. His off the ball movement is fantastic. And something that United struggle with is that off-the-ball movement. You look at the centre-backs, if they can be pulled around and they're not the quickest, then I really think Everton could exploit that. But without that, I mean, what can United do to exploit Everton's weaknesses?
It's a tough one without knowing who's actually going to play for the United team, which until you see the lineup against Istanbul, you probably won't know because, like I said, I think it'd be easy enough to say who's going to play if this was a Sunday kickoff. But because it's early on a Saturday, they're traveling back from Istanbul, probably don't get back until Thursday. It's very difficult to kind of decide. I think what you're going to have to do is try and focus in on some of those areas that, like Matt said, that with Seamus Coleman just coming back, you have to target and see really how fit is he coming back into the game. It kind of works well with United going down the left anyway. I think the issue for United is going to be is, like I said earlier, that wall in midfield. If United want to sit back like they have done against Arsenal and Chelsea and try and hit Everton on the break, it's not going to happen. The only way United are going to be able to beat them is they're going to have to put pressure on Everton because, look, James just coming back. If he has any sort of injury, you have to put more and more pressure on the Everton team before getting the ball to him. So if you can pressure the likes of Alan Decore before it gets to James, well then there's that. Like Matt said, I don't think there's going to be a big issue for United at right back for Aaron Wan-Bissaka without Richarlison there. That's one that I think it's a benefit for United because there's not so many ways that Everton will be able to score. The problem is going to be Calvert-Lewin. What centre-back partnership do you use? Do you see, again...
You
can't play Lindelof, mate. No. You have to play Axel. Someone stronger.
You know what, lads? Lindelof's had some great games against us. Whenever I've watched him in the flesh, I've always been dead impressed with him, to be fair.
Yeah,
he's a good player.
It's a tough one.
I think he's a good player. Go on, Kieran.
It's a tough one because, look, I think the game against Istanbul, you'll be able to tell pretty soon after that who's playing against Everton because the way Solskjaer's done it before is that even you look at the game last week, the likes of Bruno and stuff played in the Champions League, didn't play it might have been the opposite with Pogba, where they would have played in the Champions League, didn't start against, they didn't start the following week. It's something that United, especially this week, are going to have to do. It's a tough one. It's hard to look at the game and feel very confident as a United fan because Everton have been in better form, and also the fact that they've been hard to kind of play against. Now, it goes back to that point of when one of those key cogs aren't in the team. So, for example, Richarlison, how does, as we said earlier, that this kind of well-oiled machine from earlier on the season, how does it work? Does taking out one of those parts kind of disrupt things? And like Matt said, where players are like, what do we do? If there's any sort of hesitation there from some of the Everton players, that's where United kind of have to pounce on it. Hopefully the likes of Rashford and Greenwood, or if it's Cavani that plays, are going to be able to put pressure in that defence. If they can do that, and if United can kind of get out early to kind of score a goal early, I think that's when there'll be more pressure on Everton because they'll try and push more forward. And that's when there might be some kind of leakages in that kind of solid defensive structure that they've shown this season. But again, it's one of those games that's really hard to tell. You've seen Everton play against Newcastle where you're like, this doesn't look like the same team as early on in the season. But then if you get the Everton from early on in the season, it's going to be a very difficult day for United. I've always found those early kickoffs on a Saturday. They're really, really annoying. I hate them because, especially when it's a good game, I would much rather see that one at like 4 or 5 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday, because one, there's more attention, and I just feel the players are more ready for it. You look at the first halves of those games, and half the players are still asleep because they've literally gotten up from bed, they've traveled in, and they're going straight into a game.
Goodison as well. It's God, I've got so many memories, Ciaran, of games where Matt, when we've gone to Goodison and it's like a early kickoff on a Saturday, and
we get killed.
We get killed. Yeah, we're half asleep. It happened last season, and I look. I'm not the most confident about it, but Matt, I'm going to bring you in quickly because I know you've got to rush off in about 10 minutes. But just give myself and Ciaran your thoughts on Man United, because from an outsider's point of view, like you mentioned players like Cavani, you know, if Everton have an injury, you're bringing in Iwobi. United, they've got Cavani, they've got Greenwood, Martial's back as well, Rashford. This is a good United squad, and I don't care what anyone else says, and I always say this Man United squad is the best squad since Sir Alex. We're not doing very well at the moment. What's your thoughts on Solskjaer, and what's your thoughts on United as a whole? And I mean, are you of the view that perhaps he is slightly out of his depth, or do you think it's just early season, no preseason? It's just a bit of a struggle at the moment.
It just all. I mean, you lads obviously know better than me, but it just, for me, it just all feels really fractured. You know, you mentioned there about the diamond against Leipzig, which worked really well. And then there's a free at the back that you played at PSG, which worked really well. And then the next week, it doesn't seem to work very well at all. And it just feels like something's not right there. And we're getting up to 2 years now, aren't we, with Solskjaer's been at the football club. And, you know, I still think of him as like he's new in the job. He's still figuring things out. And, you know, it just doesn't feel like it's going to work. You know, it just feels as though, you know, while there's a lot of goodwill towards him, and he seems like a nice guy, and he's willing to trust young players. He's obviously helped the development of people like, you know, we mentioned Wan-Bissaka there. Greenwood's obviously come on and done really well. Martial's evolved as a centre forward. He's done some good things there, Solskjaer. But obviously, Manchester United supporters are going to want to see them challenging Liverpool and Manchester City and being at the top end of European football. And I think if they are going to do that, then probably some ruthless decisions need to be made. And I think that's you know, growing up when it came to United and when they were under Ferguson and, you know, David Gill, was that the one thing you could always associate them being was ruthless in things they did. And obviously that I don't mean in terms of sacking managers, but when it came to players, when it came to signings, they were ruthless and they made decisions that they thought would benefit the football club in the long term. And I don't know, maybe this is just because seeing Pochettino looking glorious with his new hairstyle on Monday Night Football in the week, and you know,
like your hair.
Yeah, put him in elite company there, mate. I'll take that. Yeah, but you know, maybe it's just because he's in a nice studio and he's saying lots of lovely things about football and looking back on his career. But you just have to think, you know, he's right there, and he's not a manager that's won trophies by any means, but he's somebody who I think if you got a hold of players like Bruno Fernandes, like Mason Greenwood, etc., then he'd probably be able to eke that extra 10% out of them that United need to push on. And then that'll be a platform for them to push on again, where they can potentially challenge for things. So I don't know. I quite like Solskjaer. Quite like some of the things he's done. You know, I imagine as supporters, you lads have had some great times under him down the years. You know, you've been to the Etihad and won a couple of times. Been to Paris and won twice. You know, you've won derbies at home. He's been a manager that's been able to give United supporters some great moments, but it just feels like that might be it. He might be a man for moments, but not a man for the long-term future in regards to getting long-term stability for you.
That's the best I've heard it summed up, Ciaran, isn't it? And, you know, I know we've got to rush off, so I'll just ask you guys for your score predictions. But just on the Solskjaer thing, all the great work, which fans just can't see. And when you do more podcasts, when you do more research, you actually realize what he's done behind the scenes. The academy's completely been revamped. The culture, and people say, oh, the culture's toxic. The players are happy generally. And it's a long time you can say that. We lost 4-0 to Everton, and that was a dark day. A really dark day. And you thought these players are absolutely rotten to the core. He's done that, but you sometimes have a feeling, has he reached his ceiling? It doesn't help with the ownership. We talk about Ancelotti being able to bring in the players that he wants. I don't think Ollie's necessarily been allowed to do that. He's done some great things, but I'd agree with your assessment, Matt. And the Monday Night Football was an audition for Pochettino. I think he won a few people's hearts. This idiot included, but
it just feels like I don't know. It's in no rush, by the way, lads. Don't worry, it's absolutely fine. Cool. It just feels a bit to me as though whenever it feels like things are about to spiral completely out of control, that he just pulls a mad win out of somewhere. Like, the game in Paris where you think, that's a result which buys you another couple of months, isn't it? As another Manchester United manager, and then you can have 2 or 3 bad weeks there, and then he'll do it again, and then another 2, 3 bad weeks, and he'll do it again. And I've seen some reports this week about him potentially losing his job if he gets beat at the weekend. I imagine they're quite premature, but he just feels as though he's always got a great result in him. And while that's a good thing, I suppose it can be a dangerous thing as well if you're looking at building towards United being a long-term force in English football again.
Yeah, absolutely. Ciaran, I'm going to bring you in because I can see you itching to say something. But before I do that, guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be shameless about it because I want you to help us get to 1K because we can then have amazing guests like Matt on, and he's been fantastic. Ciaran, what is your view on this? And we're not saying go and sack him immediately, but I've been sort of banging the drum. People saying, oh, it's only 1 defeat, but United are sitting in 15th. And if you were seeing some sort of consistency in terms of, we've been fantastic in Europe, but in terms of style of play, formation, I'm happy about. You can be flexible, you can be versatile. That's not a problem for me. But you're seeing more of that style of play, that identity that that you're going to see that every week with United. Sometimes I see United and I just don't necessarily actually see the identity. And we've seen managers like Ancelotti come in and do that in a shorter period of time. And as Matt said, it's been 2 years. So, you've got to ask these questions. And when you see other managers possibly getting more out of a squad that perhaps is not as talented, I think it's valid to ask these sort of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I would say where I'm at with Solskjaer is the team's inconsistent. You'll see him play against some of the big teams like last year, and you'll beat Man City twice in the league. You'll beat Chelsea, whatever it was, 4 times last season. You'll be pretty much, I think it was the first team to take points off Liverpool last year, and it kind of gave other teams kind of a way to play against them, very similar to, I think, the previous year when United were the first team to kind of put up a fight against Man City. He knows how to kind of set up his teams in those big games. The problem is the consistency. If you're going to be that long-term team that's going to be challenging for titles, if you're not consistent, I've always said it, an inconsistent team is not a good team. It's hot and cold, and you will never win anything. Personally, I think what he's done in the past 2 years, I think a lot of people don't realize just how good a job he's done because of how bad it was getting under Mourinho. It was getting more toxic by the day. If United waited much longer, you would have had a lot of players leave the club. You would want to keep. You would have had a lot of people around the club just completely depressed, which that's where they were when Solskjaer came in. So
you have to ask Jamie Jackson, don't you? Remember, I had him on, from The Guardian, and he said that the club was awful. There were people that had been there for 20 odd years, even the people in the canteen, the groundsmen, really the sort of the pillars of the club. They were just disillusioned with the way that it was under Mourinho.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think you have to commend Solskjaer to come in. He wasn't taking the job as the idea that it was going to be the permanent job. He was told he was getting it till the end of the season until they were going to hire a new manager, and they told him they were going to hire a new manager. The only reason that he's in the job is because he went, 13, 14 games without losing. It's hard not to reward someone with a contract when that happens. And then he's gone through these big runs where it's worked. The problem is, I've always said, I don't think he's that kind of manager you're going to win a lot of titles with, but he will improve the team, and he has. I think if results don't improve, I think he still makes it to the new year. I think that's when you start to see maybe more questions if this kind of form continues. I don't think it'll continue. It may not be a great performance this weekend because, look, Everton's tough after the midweek game of the Champions League. But after that, look, I think once you start having those kind of one game a week where they have the whole week to prepare for the Premier League game, I think you'll start to see the results kind of shoot up a little bit more. And especially if United beat Istanbul this week and the following fixture, they're basically qualified for the Champions League then for the knockout round. So they don't really have to play their strongest team in those last two. So then you can kind of focus on the Premier League for a few months anyway. So I think that's where it might get a little bit easier. So I think we're probably just going to have to look at it over kind of the next few months rather than from week to week, because when you do that, you'll you'll get yourself in a frenzy by just looking at week to week. Does the manager stay? Does he not? I think you just look at it as an overall season and then just see how he gets on.
I think you said fantastic points. I do agree, and this is what annoys me when people say, "Oh, he's not done a good job." It's just nonsense because I think he's done a phenomenal job. And I said before, Matt, I want to get your opinion on this before we go on to predictions. But I said before that he's a manager from A to B. He came in with purely with the objective to just fix the club, stop the rot, because it's just been 26 years of incredible success and hard work by Sir Alex has just been wiped out in 7 years. You've got those monkeys upstairs who don't care about football. They don't care about. They just care about the money. And he had to stop the rot, and he's done that so well. And for me, it was always about he's an A to B manager. So you come in, stop the rot, turn it around, get the culture back to what we like to see. Yes, okay, maybe the football hasn't been Manchester United of old, but actually, like you said, some of the best times I've had the last 7 years have been under Ollie, and I absolutely thank him for that. But there comes a time when perhaps you've hit your ceiling, and he might take you from A to B, but B to C is challenging for trophies. It's more of a obvious identity and style of play, which perhaps another manager would be able to do. So, with that said, do you agree with that? That maybe he has taken the team as far as he can, and then someone else now has a pretty good squad actually to now build upon.
Yeah, it's almost like, listen to it. A lot of the stuff that you guys are speaking about there is sort of enlightened me, to be honest, in regards to what the club was like under Mourinho and how Solskjaer's changed the culture around it. Stuff that I hadn't even thought about, to be honest, and maybe more, he deserves more credit than perhaps I thought because of that. But yeah, just listen to you speak, and it's all the things you said. It sort of feels like the United needed the manager in the mold of someone like Ancelotti, because I think before Ancelotti came to Everton, what people who didn't think it'd be a good fit at Everton were saying was that what Ancelotti does is he goes to clubs that have got a lot of good players that things aren't quite working, and he just polishes them a little bit, and he makes players who are playing probably at 75% of the best play a little bit better by putting an arm around them, by doing some basic, tactical work and just simplifying things a little bit. And you sort of feel like that's going up what you said there. That's what United need now. It may not be so much a manager just going to come in and be totally welded to a system and a way of play, and it's just getting that little bit extra out of, making Bruno Fernandes a bit of a better player, making Greenwood a bit of a better player, Martial taking him on another level, adding a little bit more consistency to someone like Rashford's game. It feels like that's what you need. And the analogy A to B is a really interesting one, because it just made me think of what people were saying about Carlo Ancelotti before he came to Everton, and what sort of manager he was going to be, and that's sort of where United feel like they are now.
My worry when I saw Carlo go to Everton was exactly that. He is that B to C, and could he actually do the A to B, the rebuild? And that's why I did a podcast about Carlo, and I was like, one of my favorite managers. I would have taken him at United after Sir Alex. I would have taken him after Moyes. I would have taken him after Mourinho. Sorry, after LVG and Mourinho. I would take Carlo now even. I think
no, you can't have him now. He's happy in Liverpool. Lad, sorry. Yeah.
Are you sure? Maybe we can do a little deal. Maybe, I don't know. We'll give you 3 points this weekend if you give us Carlo. But no, I that was always my thing. And you're right. You're completely right. And I always say this to Ciaran, don't I? I always say the A to B, the B to C. And it's not me saying go and sack Ollie now. And a lot of people think that I am about that. I'm not. I just think that you have to look at what he's done. And some people can't see the good that he's done. And like we said, behind the scenes, myself and Ciaran talk about this all the time on the podcast we do. It's huge. I mean, Ciaran, just talk a little bit to listeners about Nicky Butt and it's Nick Cox, isn't it? The impact they've had behind.
Yeah. So just to have a bit of a background, is when Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill left, roughly 70 to 80% of the youth academy scouts left and retired at the same time. And instead of replacing them, they just left whoever was there, and nothing kind of changed. The only changes that happened was that last Van Gaal and start of Mourinho era, they started rebuilding Carrington, and they put in some extra pitches, and I think they improved the weight room and stuff, but they didn't really change much for the scouting system. Then Solskjaer came in. Nicky Butt was promoted to head of football, or head of youth academy there. And they started bringing in players. They started bringing in scouts, where really they've revamped their whole scouting network now. A year into that, they brought in Nick Cox from Sheffield United, and then moved him into the head of player development, and Nicky Butt kind of moved to kind of be the overall kind of manager of the youth academy where he is now. And you've just seen more and more both young British players coming into the academy. So you've seen like Joe Hugill this year. And then you've also seen a lot of kind of international talent come in. So you would have seen Hannibal Mejbri come in last season. You've seen a couple of the new lads from like Madrid and Barcelona came in this year. And really, when you look at the under-23s, it's primarily 16-year-olds that are playing, and they're beating a lot of the teams. They're drawing with some of the teams that they're playing against, which are like the one that kind of shouts out to me is the game against Arsenal that they played. There was about 6 of the Arsenal players that were within the Arsenal's first team, and they drew 3-3 with really the majority of the players that were in that team were 16 and 17. And you're just seeing more and more now that the recruitment at that level is where a top club's recruitment at that level should be. The problem is that you don't see it at the first team level, but is that because of the market? Is it that some of the prices for players just aren't worth it anymore? And is it better off for a team to invest at that age level and then bring in players from there? You've seen it with the likes of, even though Mason's been with United for most of his career, if he plays the way we expect him to play, he's saving the club 100 million by the way he's playing. Same thing with Axel Tuanzebe. Now, they were already within the club, but there's a lot of other players that are coming through the team that, like, even you look at the kid Charlie McCann from City, that he initially played for United, and then once everything happened with Ferguson, he left, went to City, and now has come back again. So it's something that works well, and the big clubs need to kind of be able to do that. You don't see it as much anymore with a lot of teams. I see Man City, the way they've recruited is more, they look for kind of the bigger kids and the like really tough, strong kids at younger levels, because they know they're going to be able to beat some of the more technical kids because they're smaller, but they're more skillful. That's where Man City kind of did it. Really, you haven't seen anyone kind of with that kind of skill level in the City Academy for a while since Jadon Sancho. Really, you've seen a lot of these kind of bigger kids. So you've seen this, I can't remember the striker's name, that I think he played in the Champions League, very kind of tough and tall kid for Man City when Aguero and stuff, where their academy is littered with those type of players. But what you're seeing from United now is you're getting a mixture of different styles, and they're trying to mold it together. And it's probably the first time in about 10 years that the under-23s is trying to play in a way that the first team should play. So it's an easy transition from the youth academy to first team football, which is the way it should be. But a lot of academies don't do it because so many of them are focused in on results. While at United, it's not so much results, it's actually developing the players to become first team footballers. And it's something that I think needs to be commended from the club. When we criticize them for everything else, I think that's something that you kind of need to applaud them for.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic summary. And guys, you've got to look at these things that happen behind the scenes. You've got to look at things more holistically. You can't just look at the first team and think, okay, well, this is all that you see. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that a manager does have an input. And United don't have a director of football. So that's what Ollie's been doing. He's got a transfer committee that works with him. And you can say that the signings we've made over the past 2 years have probably been our better signings. Matt, have you got anything to add to that before we go on to the score prediction?
No, it's just fascinating stuff. I think it always helps when the entire football club has a common thread running through it, and I think that's something that hasn't really been the case at Everton for a while in regards to helping those young lads make the next step. So yeah, just fascinating stuff, and it's I suppose it shows the importance of you guys having these conversations, the supporters having these conversations, as opposed to just tired cliches being trotted out in mainstream media about various aspects of Solskjaer's management and whatever, because it's certainly been enlightening to me to hear about some of the good things that he's done at the football club that don't get spoken about in detail elsewhere.
Absolutely. And likewise with you, with Everton, from the outside, I mean, we've seen the turmoil for years, haven't we? Spending a huge amount of money, bringing in managers hasn't really worked out. I mean, I thought Marcus Silva was going to be a great appointment. I liked what he did at even Hull. I know they got relegated. Watford, he did well. It didn't work out. Huge amounts of money being spent. We know that Mashiri's obviously got a lot of money, but it seems like Everton finally are now moving in the right direction. It just takes one manager with a vision, and if they believe in him, and I think you've got a fantastic. I mean, I've said it many times how much I like Ancelotti. He's always been one of my favorite ones. Even when I was younger, I'm 25, so you saw the great Milan sides that he had where they won the Champions League, and just great stuff. But let's move on to the predictions. I'm going to bring up my little banner that comes across the bottom, just the nice visuals. Right, I'm going to go first, guys. I'm just going to keep it really short and sweet. I think it's going to be a cagey game. I think, again, United is just not going to want to lose. And I think we have to win this. I'm being honest. I'm one of those that thinks if we don't win this game, it could be curtains for Solskjaer. But I'm going to go for a 1-1. It could very much be a 0-0. But 1-1. I think it will be a very tight and cagey game. Matt, what is your score prediction?
I'll go for score draw, but I think it might be 2-2. I think it might be a little bit more open in that sense. I think if Everton have Richarlison, I'd really fancy them for this game, but with him being suspended, it's a massive blow for us. But I think Digne being back in the side, Coleman maybe being back, I'm not sure on that one yet. Rodriguez should be back by all accounts. I think there'll be a lot more varied in attack. Have a lot more options to get at United, and I think it'll be an open game. I just worry. United have got such a great amount of firepower. They've got so many players who can score goals, and I think Everton will struggle to cope with a lot of them. So, yeah, I think score draw 2-2.
Nice one. Ciaran, what is your prediction?
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about this over the last day or two, and I do think there'll be goals in the game. I think United might just nick it, and I have 2-1. Again, I think if Everton had everybody fully fit, I think I'd be a little bit more worried about not winning the game. But I'll go for a 2-1. But I think it will be one where you are going to get a couple of goals in there. So it's a tough one. But again, this type of game, I think anything could happen.
Absolutely. And guys, that is us for time. Matt, thank you very much, mate, for coming on. You've been a phenomenal guest. We've learned so much today. Where can all the listeners find you on Twitter, if you can remember that? And where can they find the Blue Room podcast if they want to hear more in-depth sort of analysis of Ancelotti and Everton?
Yeah, I should have put me Twitter thing in the little name bar like you guys have done there. Haven't I missed the trick there? Yeah, but it's at Matt J Football is my Twitter. The Blue Room is at the Blue Room ESC. I'm sure if United win at the weekend and you want to hear a load of Evertonians moaning about various things, then it could be a good listen for you guys. So check it out if United do win. But yeah, it's been a pleasure being on, lads. Thanks very much for asking.
No problem. It's been
thanks.
We'll get you back on as well for sure. It's really interesting. Just getting more of an in-depth conversation. Ciaran, thank you as always for being my usual co-host. As we can see, you've changed your @ handle, so now that is actually his name, guys. Ciaran Power Hall. Well, that is a powerful name, mate.
Yeah.
So guys, make sure you check it out. We've got some great 2 live shows today. We've got the masterclass with myself and Rob Blanchett, and we've got Red Devils Talk. Ciaran will be joining me with 3 other people, so make sure you check that out, and we will see you next time.